Hello, everyone. This is Lee Andrews with Live with Lee. I am part of the Akathame organization, and thank you for joining another Live with Lee broadcast. We welcome everybody. Today, we have two esteemed guests on this broadcast, and we will get to them in just a second. I do want to take a moment that I have not done before in any of the broadcasts is tell you exactly what I do for a living. Many of you have been asking. So, Akathame is an executive search and direct hire search organization, and we focus primarily within the marketing communications digital design space, from production level all the way to C-suite. So that is what we do. If you are looking for work or if you are looking to find great people, please let me know. And today, let's get to Kelly and Matt, and thank you both for joining. I know how crazy busy your schedules are, and now I need to put my glasses on because I have notes. So first of all, let me introduce Kelly Boykin to you. Kelly Boykin is the Senior Vice President at Aquent, and she manages all the master service provider engagements for Aquent. And let me just explain what an MSP is. These are the organizations that go in and organize all of the contingent workforce within a company so that they partner with other staffing firms to support an organization's total contingency plan. And Aquent is the marketing communications design expert in that space. So they are very well recognized for the work that they do in that domain. So Kelly, thank you for being here. Matt Newman is a partner in an organization called Camino Partners, and he focuses on representing and filling positions for recruiters in the United States. So you have got two prime experts knowledgeable about what's going on in the marketplace when it comes to work and jobs, and especially for recruiters. So let's get into this right now. Again, thank you both for joining. So Kelly and Matt, you're both in the staffing industry, right? One places recruiters, the other really focuses on a very specific part of an organization. And you have actually helped architect how staffing solutions are utilized in those organizations. So I first want to turn to Matt. Matt, your organization recruits positions in the staffing industry or recruiter positions. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
So tell me about, you've got a very unique perspective on all of this. So tell me what's happening with the recruiting practice right now. I mean, it's tough. I mean, the pandemic has really changed everything. So are we helping, are recruiters finding work? Are they out of work? What's going on?
Yeah, we are definitely seeing a contracted market, and the likelihood is for this year the recruitment market will contract. What we're seeing is a lot of recruiters have been furloughed or made redundant, particularly in the larger firms. So there's a lot of recruiters out there looking for roles at the moment. Some industries are doing better than others. So industries like life sciences, obviously it's very much in the news that we're looking for a vaccine. It's an industry where people work from home. Certain parts of healthcare around placing nurses has been very positive, and IT where it's cloud-based, Amazon Web Services, Salesforce have continued to do quite well throughout the pandemic. So there always will be businesses that do well in a recession, but evidently there's lots of businesses that aren't, such as retail, financial services as well.
Yeah, I would say that retail has probably been the worst hit, hasn't it?
Well, it's effectively been closed, so it's been tough if you're a recruiter in that market.
So if they were prepared with their online business, though, would they not be faring fairly well during this time?
Yeah. I mean, in the UK, what we've seen is Amazon's done very well. So I think their sales are up like 40% in the UK. I haven't got the American figures, but I know they've potentially taken a lot of business off of retail that perhaps their online presence wasn't as good as it could be.
Yeah.
So I think that's an issue as well.
So Kelly, you have this very high level bird's eye view of the economy right now. You're in a very unique position. So tell me, what's the employment landscape looking like for you, and how, because you are part of MSP programs, how has that relationship changed, if at all?
Well, let me just start with Matt. I can tell you that I've helped Amazon in the United States, I think single-handedly. I think I am the reason why their sales are up during all of this. And so if you're listening from Amazon, you are welcome. Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously this is unprecedented, right? I mean, in the US, we have had 13 recessions since the Great Depression 100 years ago, which is pretty crazy. And they've all been very unique, but the last few have been even more unique than ever before. We had and if you think about leading up to the recession in the 90s or in 2000, if anybody was around back then, and even the most recent one in 2008 or 9, pales in comparison to this. And so we see, much as Matt said, we see parts of the industry that are, or the economy that are still doing pretty well, parts that are just absolutely devastated. Our MSP partners are certainly mirroring that. Some are with their clients are doing really well, some are struggling and are losing clients or just shut down, altogether. So it's been a very interesting time, as it is. That's not revelation for anybody. I think what's been interesting for me to be thinking about, and as we were getting ready to have this conversation, the staffing industry has become such a big part of our economy, certainly in the US, and I know in the UK as well. It's such a large portion of our workforce now. It was less than 2% just a couple decades ago, and that's grown significantly. So when you have an industry like ours, that's a leading economic indicator. When things are about to go down, we go down first because that's the first thing to be impacted as contractors. We tend to see an uptick first because they're bringing back contractors before they bring back permanent workers. And that has certainly been the case for several of these recessions, but because the industry is such a larger portion of the employment market overall now, it has taken a disproportionate hit versus full-time workers, which is, I guess you could argue, part of why companies want to use temporary workers so that they can make those changes and adjustments very, very quickly. But it's had a very, very sharp effect on not just our clients and our industry, but also a unique perspective for how this particular generation of workers needs to adapt and be flexible as they look at surviving a recession, since none of them under 30 really have had to do that so far.
So let's talk about the pandemic, though, because if we look at, you make a really good point. If companies are looking at contingent workforce to ease themselves back into production, right? And where are they going to go? Are they opening their doors? Are they trying to work remotely? I mean, how is that working?
Yeah, I mean, and that is the most unique thing, of course, about this particular recession is that nature of it. In our industry, we were very fortunate. We had a large portion of our workers already able to be remote. We had, I guess, 35% of our talent were offsite anyway. So we had to scramble, but we were able to do a really pretty good job of working with our clients to get a lot of our talent remote. And I think a lot of industries did that. By nature, many parts of the staffing industry, light industrial being one of them, that's not something that can happen, right? And so that is also going to vary by what the client's having you do and the portion of staffing that you're in, the depth of that impact.
So I think that you made a really good point, Kelly, and I just want to bring this to everybody's attention that the global staffing market is worth how much now? What did we come up with? It's like $500
billion, probably. Yeah.
Let me see. And I had this number, but I don't have it. Oh yeah, 491 billion US dollars. I mean, that's huge. $491 billion. So this really is what the industry that you guys are supporting really is a barometer of what's going on out there in the overall economy. So, so with the unemployment at where it is, how are you guys, Matt, what are you telling candidates? How are you getting requirements? What is your traffic for recruiting requirements?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic will be, it's I heard someone describe it as a half marathon yesterday. It's not a sprint, but we will eventually see the end of it, and the recruitment industry always bounces back. So it will be a temporary issue. I am already seeing companies that are doing quite well. I hear companies telling me they've had record months over the past quarter. Many companies we work with had never worked remote, but have adapted to it quite well over this period. And I think they've been pleasantly surprised how well their teams have performed, working from home and actually getting better results working from home than in the office. So there are a lot of positive signs. Like I say, some industries are performing just as well as ever, like life sciences, and I know some healthcare. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think I would say there are certainly positives in the market to be taken, and all the markets will eventually recover, I believe.
Okay, well, it has to, because that's history shows us that, right? It eventually does cover, but I think it's going to look differently. And I don't know how to pronounce this person's name. Forgive me. I'm not even going to try, sir. Not even going to try. But the comment is, with futuristic tech adoption and digital transformation, will futuristic tech adoption and digital transformation affect the staffing industry drastically post-COVID? And I think what he's saying is, how is technology going to change the staffing industry? Now that we know that the genie cannot go back in the bottle. We know that people can work remotely now. So how do you think that's going to affect your businesses, from recruiting and from the staffing industry?
I'll go first if that's okay, Matt. I think it is such a widespread impact. I could answer that question for probably the next 4 hours. And so probably nobody wants me to do that. But I think you think about it this way, just within the staffing industry, for years, you needed to be in an office. You needed to be on site. That was our culture. It was very frowned upon to be remote. And within the staffing industry, of course, we've all had to be remote, and now we've proven that we can. Much like most countries and most companies within different countries have been able to get their workers up and running and be productive across a variety of industries. So I think when we look at within staffing and the impact on the recruiting industry, we've had to do a lot of things to be able to work remotely, but now we've proven that we can. So I think you'll see numbers of offices around country changing for companies. I think where they have the ability to look at potentially reducing their footprint, having smaller offices and saving money that way, that will probably happen. Technologies that are leveraged to enable the recruitment process while individuals are remote, whether that's sourcing or onboarding talent or compliance, all of those industries, I think, will continue to be more and more important to us, because we won't be necessarily sitting in an office.
Right.
And I think we're going to have to think about how our talent and all of the rules along with how our talent can work offsite. And right now, if God forbid, one of our clients right now says we want our workers back on site, I think we'll panic for a little bit, because we're not ready for that to happen. There's a lot of risk and fear associated with that. So I think technology has been a driver in so many things over the last few decades, including the mindset that talent have around their scarcity and their pay. But I think how it's going to get us through this as well.
What about the recruiting profession, Matt? What you do is remote, right? So I
mean, we're usually in an office, but I do it from the UK. We've traveled to the US regularly. I think the fact that the recruitment industry has adopted tech quite well over the last few years has allowed us to work this way during the pandemic. If this pandemic had happened in 2005, I wouldn't like to think what it might mean for the staffing industry in terms of the decline we would have seen, whether governments would have reacted in the same way, because I think pretty much every business would have had to close down, even if it was only 15 years ago. It would have been a very different situation. So technology has definitely improved the recruitment sector just in my time. The ability to make calls on your mobile phone and just little things like that you just couldn't do in the past. I am hesitant that remote working is the complete future. I think there needs to be a bit of perspective. I think collaboration is vitally important in an industry like ours. You learn a lot around others, speaking to others, sharing candidates, sharing clients. When you're working remotely, you perhaps don't talk to each other as much. It worries me a little bit, particularly people probably from around sort of 18 to early 30s that are going into new jobs. They may be graduates. I don't think we've quite yet got a handle on how best to train people who have no experience, and I think they're likely to be the people that suffer most. If we decide to remain remote. Interestingly, I've already got clients that are going back into the office in New York. So some companies are already going back. I think that's on the basis that they prefer to work in the office because of that collaborative approach. So I think a balance is good rather than, it's permanently remote.
So you're saying it doesn't have to be all or nothing, that we need to find the right solution for the right providers and the right services that we're supporting.
Totally. I mean, tech will continue to improve. I'm sure, some of the AI I've seen and bots I've seen will take recruitment to a different level. However, I think there's certain elements you get from working in office you can't get from working remotely. So I think it's important that there is a balance. I mean, in my business, we're potentially looking at 3 days in the office, 2 days from home, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so let's talk about, so one of the questions that we talked behind the scenes in prep for this call, we talked about what's happening to salaries and rates. And I do want to bring that up because I field a couple of calls or emails every day that talk about how should I be negotiating during COVID. Companies want me to lower my salary expectations. They're taking advantage of that. Should I be lowering my salary expectations? If other people are doing it, then I'm going to be out of work and blah, blah, blah. What are you advising? Matt, we'll start with you. What are you finding that companies are doing to salaries from a direct hire? Are they still competitive? Are they high? Are they lowballed them? What are they doing?
I think in the main that the salaries are still competitive in the staffing industry. It depends. In all honesty, it depends what you're going to bring to a client at the moment. I think the market has, due to the pandemic, has moved from being a candidate-driven market to being more of a client-driven market. So I think if you're looking for a new role, you've got to go into interviews and thinking, what is it that I can offer to that client? Is it my candidate network? Is it my client network? Am I amazing at placing good candidates? And if you can come with an interesting proposal for them, they will still hire, and they'll offer you a decent salary. I'm seeing in the main that candidates are being offered probably similar salaries to what they're on, what they were on previously. I'm not seeing, for want of a better word, lowballing.
Okay, good. So that's good to know for recruiters. And what about your services, though, Matt? Are they asking you to lower percentages or extend payment terms or anything creative like that?
Yes. Yeah. I recently placed the candidate on very different terms where it's over a 12-month period. And it's billed each month. And if he was to leave any month, they will stop paying me, but there's no rebate. So, there's lots of different creative ideas you can have around fees to make it more applicable to the client. Some clients, due to their cash flow, are asking to pay us over like 6-7 months and splitting the fee that way as well. So we are having to be more flexible.
Do you think is that a pandemic issue, or was this happening before the pandemic took?
It's been a pandemic issue.
Yeah.
I mean, even the companies that are doing well are just a little bit concerned about what they're seeing in the market. There's an election coming up. There's a ban on visas. So there's lots of things going on in the background outside of the pandemic that I guess is concerning people. So
I'm going to come back to that ban on visas in just a minute. Kelly, what are you seeing from your clients? Are they doing anything? Are they still keeping the rates the same, or are they asking you to do something creative like pay over a 12-month period?
So we're seeing our own version of that on the contingent side. We have many clients who, whether that's with the MSP or our direct clients, that are doing a variety of things to protect themselves right now. And I think we really need to stick with this theme of the market changed so quickly from being a skill scarcity market to just the opposite, because I think that really is an important thing for us to really focus on in a moment. But what we're seeing from clients is many of them have asked for reduced rates from their staffing firms, from their MSPs, from their staffing firms. They've come back to us and said, we need you to lower rates by X%. And usually margins are such that there is no way of doing that without reducing talent pay rates as well. So we've got a number of situations where talent might have had to reduce pay. In fact, in some cases, very large public companies did this for their permanent workers as well. And so at least there's some fairness there. Everybody is taking a little bit of a cut. In the past, when we've had recessions and this would happen, it was usually fairly short-lived. We would say, tell us the amount of time, how long is this cut going to take place, and then rates would come back up. But right now, there's an open-endedness to that because clients are unsure of when it is going to come back from them. We're also seeing, we're seeing requests for extended payment terms. As most people know, we pay the talent every week, and usually we'll bill a client and get paid every 30, 45 days, maybe 60 days. But we're seeing clients asking for 90, 120-day payment terms. And in some cases, they're now writing these things into new contracts. So it's not something that will go away when the pandemic is over with. It's something that we could be stuck with for a while. So we're looking at all of those things. If that's the impact on us as a staffing firm, naturally, the pay rate available for our talent is also going to be different than what it was, even 6 months ago. There are absolutely skill sets that are still in high demand, but I think it's different, than it was. We were really relying heavily and negotiating on behalf of our talent with our clients on the fact that unemployment was so low and that the skill sets were in demand and that their competitors could scoop these people up if they didn't have a competitive offer. And that changed virtually overnight. So we've had to change in order to make sure that we do the best that we can for our talent with benefits and with pay rates. But I think it's incumbent upon people that are looking for work to also recognize this is a different world, than it was 60 days ago, 6 months ago. It's changed very, very quickly.
So this is, what we're hearing now, if you are a candidate on the job market, your mentality really has to shift. Your strategy really has to shift. My stomach got a little bit of a knot hearing that somebody doesn't want to pay for 90 days, 90 to 100 days. And you're payrolling those people. You're paying those people still every week. How does that even, are they getting those terms? Is the industry saying no collectively, or are they saying, yeah, we'll take those 90-day payment terms or 6-month payment terms? That's hard.
Yeah, I think it varies a lot, and I certainly don't want to speak for every other staffing firm out there. I think our approach has been where we have large clients, where we have loyal clients, where we have clients that we know are going to be able to pay, and we're not concerned about their inability to pay. If that's not our immediate fear, then we absolutely want to be doing what's best for the talent. And so if keeping those talent working during a time like this required us to be flexible in one way, shape, or form, we were trying to do everything that we could to be flexible. Doesn't mean that we said yes to everything, but again, yeah, where we had the opportunity to put the talent first, because we know that was the most critical thing for us, is to keep them working right now. My hope is that better companies will say, okay, we appreciate the talent's willingness, we appreciate your willingness, but now we want to go back to much more reasonable terms and whatnot, which is what the industry has done in the past and what we should be expecting.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. That's awesome. And so, Matt, let's put it into your terms. How should recruiters think about the job market right now? Given everything that Kelly has said and what you've thought, how should they be thinking about their next position?
Yeah, if I was a recruiter on the market at the moment, I'd be thinking about which companies would be doing well at the moment, whether that's a staffing business or a corporate company. So particularly in the corporate world, we're seeing tech businesses are doing quite well because they were always, a lot of them will work from home culture anyway. So like software as a service, cloud based, they would be the sort of companies that I would look to apply to. And the same goes for the recruitment sector. I would say you're less likely to have opportunities in, say, a fashion and retail recruiter or a light industrial recruiter as you might do in a healthcare recruiter or a life sciences recruiter at the moment. So I'd think carefully about the companies I approached. Also, I think on the resume front, something I see a lot is people don't possibly sell themselves enough on their resume. There's not enough achievements on there. What they did in their previous role, how they performed against their peers. What makes them stand out? Because I look at a lot of resumes where they're very similar. And I think at the moment when there's so many people that are applying for jobs, you've got to stand out from the crowd.
Let me ask you something, Matt. It seems like, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately too, the talent scarcity has really allowed, I don't want to say a laziness, but a little bit of a passive approach for a lot of candidates to not focus so hard on their resume, on their networking, on all the things that they do, because ultimately they didn't need to in order to find work before. I mean, the unemployment was so low that if you had a fairly decent resume and some good experience, you could probably find something. Do you agree? Are you seeing that where now people are having to learn to scramble and really market themselves more actively than they might have before?
Definitely. I think that will change because, I mean, a lot of people have been on the furlough scheme as well. So have perhaps, passively been looking. But I think over this month, we'll see more and more people come onto the market. So definitely, it's not going to be as easy to get a job over these next couple of months as it may have been in December, January, or it would be coming into a normal fall season. So certainly, yeah, people will need to, I think, about their resumes. How do they stand out? I would apply to businesses that are doing well as well, and try and sell myself into that business as best I can in terms of what I've done before.
Yeah. Something else I was thinking about was, and this would be interesting to know your take from a direct hire perspective, is, when we look at those under 30-ish, under 32 aged candidates, and they really haven't experienced anything except for a tight labor market where they had the power, really, if they had some good experience, to be able to write their own ticket and command the salaries and whatnot that they're looking for. When I think back to, the .com burst and all of that, you had kids coming out of college or maybe with a year of experience getting very, very large salaries. And then when the recession hit, there was just this awareness of, wow, I maybe I'm not worth as much as I thought I was a couple of years ago. I think the balance right now is between what is my worth, what is my value, and what should I be commanding so that I'm not giving away my skill, but also balancing that with the world is very, very different. And if you have the mindset of a job seeker 6 or 9 months ago, you might not find yourself being competitive. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I think another issue is like cities like New York and San Francisco and LA are very expensive as well. So people want high base salaries in order to live. So I think people have been used to having quite high base salaries and lower commission schemes or a draw system, and have been quite comfortable that way. I wonder if there'll be more of an adoption of lower base salaries, but the potential to earn much higher commission, which actually puts it back on the consultant. But in a time when there's less jobs around, companies are just, they're not going to pay high base salaries if people aren't going to bill well, unfortunately.
Yep. And I think that makes sense for recruitment in a staffing industry, right? So so I think when you're looking at sales roles, that's a traditional, lower on the base, higher on the commission. It just depends on the culture too, because that also, brings about discussions about internal competition and teamwork and supportiveness when you've created that type of atmosphere. So we're getting lots of questions here on remote work as well. So Matt and Kelly, are you seeing that your clients are open to hiring full-time or working with people, not just because they have to in this pandemic, but are they starting to open up that discussion about how could we work with this person remotely? Because really and truly, if you think about it, if you're trying to limit yourself to people who commute in, you've just shot, 90% of the potential workforce that could do really good things for you if you don't want to consider them outside of your commute area. What are your thoughts on that? Are you seeing more? It's a strategic approach to look for talent outside that physical area, that geographic area?
I've definitely seen a change. I mean, I have one client who's based in Boston that are going full remote because they feel that they can attract talent from across the US, which will help grow their business much quicker. So it certainly has been a change. What I'm seeing again is it tends to be experienced people though, due to the training element. And this goes for companies that are working remote at the moment as well. Just just how do you train someone fully remotely who has no experience? And I'm sure it's possible, but companies haven't perfected that yet. So if you're an experienced candidate, the options for remote work are much better than they were.
Yeah. The question after pandemic.
Yeah, what's also kind of interesting is even before this all happened, and by the way, I'm so looking forward to a day that we don't actually talk about COVID anymore. It'll be so nice. But even before this happened, what's interesting is the talent scarcity was driving pay and salaries and things up so high, especially when you think about a New York or a San Francisco or some of these expensive cities, that the conversation has been happening for a year or two with large corporations. How could we tap into talent that aren't on site, that aren't going to cost us as much? The same worker sitting in the middle of the country that might have the same skill set as somebody sitting in San Francisco. There's a very large difference there. So I think what's interesting is the conversations were already happening, but there was a risk reward. Do we have the ability to train them or to manage them? Do we have the technology in place? And it's almost as if that whole issue was forced. And so it's both a potential opportunity and a downside. I think companies certainly can't speak to every company, but where they can, I think a lot of mindsets are more open to remote talent because A, right now, of course, everybody's remote talent, but B, does this now, if they've built their infrastructure and they've built their ability to manage a remote workforce, does this now offer them the ability to have a wider array of workers potentially and more costly workers if they're offsite? So it's kind of an interesting situation that we found ourselves in.
Very interesting. All right. Well, we are rapidly approaching, can you believe it's been over half an hour already on this call? So I do want to make sure that we get in, I want to talk about hiring managers now. So you're seeing, companies have really cut muscle. They're not just cutting, the excess of their organizations. They're really cutting muscle. So as hiring managers who are left behind in these companies, how do they feel about that? How are those employees feeling, that they didn't get affected? Do they have the guilt of survivors, the survivor guilt kind of feeling? Have you experienced any of that? No?
Do you want to go first, Kelly? Or?
Yeah, go for it.
In some businesses, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I do speak to candidates. They're upset that they've seen their whole team made redundant or furloughed, and actually it's quite a high performing team. They've seen peers who, in the business 2-3 years were actually high performing, but have been let go on the basis they'd only been in the business 2 to 3 years. So if you reacted in that way to the pandemic, I think it's understandable that some of your staff will be upset. Certainly some companies reacted very quickly when the pandemic hit and decided to make a lot, 10-20% of the workforce redundant, and then followed that up in a couple of months' time with people with more experience. I would like to think in the main, staff in businesses haven't reacted that way, but there certainly are businesses out there that have upset some of their staff because of that reaction.
Yeah.
Because of their share price or whatever the reason was.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot more of that recently. It wasn't so much. It was like a delayed reaction. They were in their jobs and they were just wrote, and then now it's kind of really sinking in that this is going on a lot longer, and those people may not be coming back to my team. So now they're feeling it even more so. So Kelly, anything to add on that before I go into our last question?
I think, you just said something. I think there has been a delayed reaction. The last couple of recessions, I think companies acted quickly. They made cuts fairly quickly to make sure that they were in a good position. We saw some of that. April was like the largest job loss month in the US of the last couple of recessions combined. But we are seeing a trickling of more and more companies saying we held out as long as we could. And now either the payroll protection is worn off or something else has happened. And so I think there has been a bit of a delayed response. I think in terms of hiring managers and teams, obviously people are having to do more with less right now. And so, the obvious result is that some work isn't getting done right now. People are working overtime and burning out. That is typical of what happens when these sorts of events occur. So there is a bounce back, and that's the light at the end of the tunnel, is that as we get through this, I think there will be quite a demand to start to augment these teams and get people back on site to be able to accommodate some of the work that they've been needing to get done.
So thank you. The last question that I had was really around the gig economy, and I'm going to change it. I'm just starting to think about this as you guys are talking. So we've created this gig economy in this country, and one of the things that got the highest profile during this time are gig workers who didn't have healthcare, who didn't have, the unemployment insurance, and didn't have all that kind of stuff. So what do you think is going to happen to the gig economy, if you will? Are people still going to want to be gig workers? Are they going to be shying away from that now? Especially, look at all the contract recruiters that are out there. There's scores of them, right? And so what do you think what are you hearing, if you're hearing anything at all?
Yeah, there's been if you don't mind, Matt, there's been so much talk, of course, over the last year or two about that, even before the pandemic, of talent rights and benefits, equality, and that kind of thing. This is one area in particular, among others, that I'm so proud of our company, because we do offer full benefits for all of our talent. We added to those benefits in terms of sick leave and whatnot during the pandemic. So I think we were, just to put in a plug for my company, we were at the forefront of doing the right thing way before it was cool to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
And now we've been able to continue doing that. I think there are large companies that are, when you think of the largest gig economy kinds of companies that have maybe not notoriously added or provided those sorts of benefits, they are having to think about those things now. And I think staffing firms are understanding that they need to be able to step up. We are the employer, and so we need to be able to provide those benefits the same way that a full-time worker would. Otherwise, we're not going to have the very resource that we need, which is people, to be able to do this. So I think we've all had to learn over the last several decades how important this is. But again, I'm just fortunate to be someplace that we did learn that lesson in the 80s.
Yeah. And what about you, Matt? Are recruiters more cognizant of the benefits that those companies that they're representing offer? Are they looking at how companies are working with contractors? Are those considerations in their next job? Or are they just looking to get a job right now, and that's really not the
well, recruiters in general?
Yeah, what you're finding? Yeah.
It depends. There are people out there that clearly would like a job at the moment. I think in regards to kind of the gig economy, I'm quite hopeful that they will adapt. Again, I think the main people affected by the gig economy tend to be people in their 20s and maybe early 30s, and they will be the people most affected by the pandemic. So I would hope there's pressure by governments to make a change to the kind of culture that's there, because I don't think it's fair.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right. Well, I have to say that our time is concluding, so I am going to wrap things up right now. Is there anything that you want to tell anybody looking for work right now, Kelly or Matt? What advice would you give them, besides making sure that their resume has accomplishments on there? What is the one thing that you can say, this is what you really should be doing or thinking as you go through this job search right now? Any other words of wisdom?
I'll go first. I think we've said so many of these things, so I won't repeat. I think additional things to think about are what's on top of mind for companies right now. That's the kind of thing that you need to be sure are included in your resume, in your cover letter, in your conversations, in your interviews. So certainly one of those, of course, everywhere, but in the US, is diversity and inclusion. And if you are a diverse candidate, that absolutely is something that's important to companies. So be sure that you're showcasing that. But also, even if you're not a diverse candidate, where can you demonstrate that you're an ally of diversity and inclusion? Where have you participated in any volunteer organizations or task forces or things like that? So that's an subset example of ideas. But when you think about what a company is looking for, it's not just somebody that has a good resume or the right skills. They're also looking for a human being, and that human being's vision and experiences and values need to represent what the company is focusing on. And so I think that's an important thing to learn, and to make sure that you're showcasing where we might not have felt that we needed to do that in the past because of the unemployment rates.
That's excellent advice. And what about you, Matt? What would you say to a recruiter looking for a job right now?
Yeah, alongside all that, I'd work on your digital footprint. So, make sure your LinkedIn profile's up to date. Start following businesses you're interested in. Connecting with the right people in those businesses. Networking through the social media platforms. And working that way as well. Rather than just relying on an application into an email inbox, which might come along with a few hundred others, and that's where the difficulty is for the recruiter or the hiring manager, that the good applications can easily be missed. So grow your digital footprint, grow your online presence as well.
Can I add one more thing, even though it wasn't my turn?
Absolutely.
I think the last thing to think about is many companies, and maybe some staffing firms as well, are using AI in initial screening. And what that means is that if your application or your resume doesn't have on it or doesn't jump out showing the things that they are looking for in the job description, you might get set aside. You might not be shortlisted. And so I think it's interesting and helpful to know that, yeah, you need to put your best foot forward, but think about which kinds of entities might be reviewing the resume or reviewing your application. And it could be AI that is smart, but not as smart as a human. And make sure that you're speaking the language and that you're representing the things that they're asking for in your submittal.
Beautiful. All right. Well, that was worth the price of the ticket right there. So, so thank you all. Again, thank you all very much. If you are looking for representation, or if you are looking to hire people, you've got 3 people on this call that you can reach out to. Matt is the recruiter's recruiter. Kelly's organization, AQuent, focuses on marketing, communications, design. And then I focus on the executive and direct hire search within marketing, communications, and design. So as you can see, we all kind of work together. We just want to see the world work. That's it. So thank you all for joining me here with Live with Lee and Kelly and Matt. You guys have a great day. If my 2 guests could stay on the line for just a second, we'll say goodbye to everyone else.